Wake up, everyone. It's time for a call to action. Welcome to Call to Action today, where there are no sacred cows, with your host, Steve Noble, just an ordinary man who believes in an extraordinary God, and he's calling you out every week to live the Christian life in your home, your work, and even in politics. Call Steve now at 877-44-TRUTH or check him out online at c2atoday.org. And now, with some much-needed cough medicine for the church, here's your host, Steve Noble.
2 days until Turkey Day. And this is Sean Saunders filling in for the Christian wacko Steve Noble, who's in Florida. He just sent me a view from a nice pool, and so just don't get sunburnt, Steve, while you're down there. I know you've got that sensitive skin like that, right? So I'm not an ordinary man with an extraordinary God. I'm an inordinary man, or, you know, someone out of the ordinary who believes in extraordinary God. So obviously I'm elevating Steve on that one. Let me start the show out this way. And we're glad you've tuned in. We're going to take some callers later on. Perhaps the number here is 1-877-448-7884 or 1-877-44-TRUTH, 1-877-44-TRUTH. So you're 2 days away from Thanksgiving. We are. We're just a couple days out. So imagine this. You're 2 days away from Thanksgiving again this year, knowing that you're soon to encounter the challenge of being around that difficult family member that drives you, flipping crazy by how they disregard you and your values. You're already anxious about it. So you're at a complete loss again this year in knowing how to handle this, right? Can anybody relate to that today? Can I get an amen? Furthermore, you're getting all these solicitations this time of year from nonprofits, you know, in the mail and you know, as you're out and about, and perhaps, you know, on Sunday at your church saying, give money to us. Christmas shopping has started, so you'll be out on the roads more. And of course, you're going to see homeless men and women and even families on the street corner asking for money. And if you're like me, you know, sometimes I give them money, sometimes I don't. I'm about the relationship, but it always reminds you that, you know, hey, there's something wrong. What do you do? As you shop for your groceries, you'll be greeted on the way into the store, no doubt, by the ringing of bells from the Salvation Army again. Things are busier all around, even on the inside, though. However, if you're like me, you want to enjoy Thanksgiving this week in the Christmas season, right? But there's some relationships with either your family, at your workplace, at your church perhaps, that are troubling you, and perhaps even some noises within your soul that are holding you hostage. Does this sound familiar? It begs these questions. What role does God's forgiveness of me and you help determine my forgiveness and forbearance with others who even annoy or frustrate me? Number two, does giving money to nonprofits like the Raleigh Rescue Mission, and we do have Lynn Daniels today, I'll introduce him in a second, does giving money to nonprofits like the Raleigh Rescue Mission truly make a difference in the lives of men, women, and children? Does it really make a difference? Even if it does, though, why should I give? What will giving to Raleigh Rescue or any other nonprofit in town, what is that going to do for me? How is it going to impact my life that I just described to you, right? And number three, how can I begin practicing the fruit of Thanksgiving this Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving's all about that, but some of us, you know, it's been a long time since we've really been thankful. So today we're going to address these questions I've just mentioned to you by interviewing the executive director of the Raleigh Rescue Mission, Lynn Daniels, who served in this role for the past 11 years, but at the Raleigh Rescue a total of 21 years. Lynn, it's great to have you today.
Sean, glad to be here.
And listen to that voice, I'm telling you.
What a grateful time. You can tell I got laryngitis. So.
No, I like your voice. It sounds like a good old-fashioned Baptist preacher, so I'm looking forward to this show. It's good to have you, though. Thanks for coming on. So, folks, listen, you're called to action today at the end of this show. You listen to the show today. Here's what the purpose is. It's for you to take what you've learned today from my interviewing of Lynn about forgiveness, number one, we're going to deal with, generosity, and Thanksgiving and consider their expression and practice through the Raleigh Rescue Mission starting this week, this Thanksgiving. That's the call to action, if I've been clear on that. So let's get started. Lynn, we're excited about these topics. Tell us, if you don't mind, starting out by way of introduction about your own personal salvation experience, if that's okay.
John, I will. I grew up down in Wilson, just a little east of here, and I think mine is typical. I had great parents, grew up in a Christian church down there. We were always in church involved, and our family was involved with the college down there, and life was really good. So I didn't have a lot of things growing up that I was challenged with. When I was 12 years old, I did just like everybody else. It was time to get baptized, and I can't say that it did any good or not, but at that particular time, I've always known God, and I always knew exactly what he was all about, but I never heard anything about having a relationship with Jesus and those type of things. So, but I was an athlete too. I was just fortunate down there to play with some good athletes. We had great coaches, a good school system, and
right.
And so part of that was part of. So I really got involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and got to give Albert Long some.
I was about to say, do you know Albert Long?
Oh my gosh, Albert came down when I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
Came and did an assembly. Of course, back then you could talk about Jesus and whatever else, and he focused on the FCA. And a group of us got together and said, "Hey, we got to have some of that." So
right.
We got the FCA started, and then that following summer, I went up to Black Mountain to the FCA camp. And
okay.
At that particular time, that's when I learned that, hey, you could have a relationship with Jesus, and I had such a desire to do it. And my leader, that huddle leader that year, was Jerry Stovall. Jerry was the he that time was playing pro ball, and he was he had coached at LSU, and he was playing for the St. Louis Football Cardinals. And so that week was just such an inspiration for me, and his impact and what he said and how he did things that I accepted Christ into my life at that time, along with 3 other guys. It was just an amazing moment, and I couldn't get enough after that.
Were you 12 years? That's great. Were you?
I was 16 years old at that time. So, and
I
then after that, I went on and had a chance to play football at NC State. So we had FCA in high school. I was involved with FCA at NC State. Did a lot of speaking engagements. I go back to Johnny Clements. You go back to Johnny in terms of the freshman coach at State and just what he did for FCA during that time. And then I left, graduated, and at that time thought I may go to seminary, but I just said, well, no, I'm going to get on out in the work world. I graduated in the School of Textiles, so I was in manufacturing. And then my priorities changed. Obviously, I was married, and I went, I worked. I tell you what I did. We worked all the time. We played all the time. So I say I worked all the time, played hard, and also partied hard. So I enjoyed that part of my life. I thought I was enjoying by, just getting out and partying and doing the thing with drinking and that kind of thing. But as time went on, it was not what God had called me to do. So
I see. What did God called you to do? Because it's going to lead to my second question here, but I want to start with that. What do you feel like at that time, Lynn, that God had called you to do?
Well, through just a situation, I had a wife that had cancer at age started at 31. I was 33, and at that particular time, I just felt like I kind of took the old mentality: I'm big enough, strong enough, smart enough. I'm gonna bow my neck, and we'll get through the next couple of years. And I tried that, but I was working also in a high tense, high stress manufacturing job, and it just got to the point where I was just beat up. I just said I can't do this anymore, and then I had to go back to my roots of what it really was all about. And that point just when I just said, Lord, I know you didn't leave me, but I need you now. And but gosh, what a lot of then I had to get into the thing of, well, I know what I was like during high school and college. Gosh, was I really saved? And then I just had all this guilt. I really did. And so Lynn Daniel at that time needed a lot of forgiveness.
Well, that leads me to my second question. Lynn, what does forgiveness personally mean to you?
Well, I think when I talk about forgiveness, I think the first thing that blocks that is for me is pride. I think the understanding that I need to be forgiven or I need to forgive somebody else. I let that pride stand in the way. And for some reason, for a while, I didn't think God could forgive me, although I had been forgiven, even though I had accepted Him in my life. But it really was until I took I took things that really still continued to bother me in the past, and I was able to basically go in a room by myself. I wrote down all those things, and at that point gave it over to God. And that was just a difference for me. It was not a salvation experience. It was just it was weight off my shoulders, because I had forgiven those people that I felt like had hurt me or had forsaken me or had turned on me or had hurt me. But these weren't really tragic things for most people. They were for me.
Yeah.
So at that time, and it was just a big difference. And of course, that forgiveness goes further in that. It goes in family. It goes forgiveness with your spouse. It's just so many things. But the pride and probably just the guilt before I could even realize the forgiveness.
I see. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you accepted Christ at age 16. You're from a Christian background out here in Wilson. There was a spiritual transformation that took place out at Black Mountain in that area, and FCA had a big impact. You go into the textiles industry, the manufacturing industry. You're married. Some things happen in your life throughout this course of time where you maybe built those up. You didn't really take them to the Lord. And then you come to a tipping point. Your wife has cancer, if I heard you correctly.
That's right.
And then you just are weighed down, and it's time for you to just empty your truck, if you will, right?
Exactly. I mean, I had really, at that time, thought I had taken that attitude of most athletes. I can do it myself. I can work through this. And but God was the only one that could do that in my relationship with Jesus as time went on. And
that mentality, if it's to be, it's up to me, doesn't work in real life, does it? Folks, you stay right there. Great practical advice already. Making a list of all the things that's bothered you.
Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord.
It's a jam, huh? Another gospel jam. N.T. Wright, the Bishop N.T. Wright, says that if he had to sum the gospel up in just a few words, it's that Jesus is Lord. And that makes a huge difference for what we're talking about today, that good things come from bad things. We were just talking on the break, Lynn Daniels and I, about he made the statement, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, our disappointments are God's appointments. Is that what you said?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So we're glad to have you today, Lynn Daniels, Executive Director of the Raleigh Rescue. Thanks for being on Called to Action.
Glad to be here. Sean, it's a lot of fun, and I hope the topic we're talking about today will inspire somebody or trip a thought or maybe even trying to take a look at themselves. As we say a lot of times at the mission, look at yourself in the mirror and just really see what's going on with you. And if you haven't done that type of examination, it may be a good thing to do.
Yeah, James talks about that, doesn't he? So I want to start out by way of introduction. This is Sean Saunders filling in for the Christian wacko Steve Noble. Steve wanted me to mention from his beautiful spot he's got in Florida that Pastor Chris Connell over at Raleigh First Assembly. Chris is a great guy. We've done a show together before. Not that would make a difference in you listening probably, but nonetheless, Pastor Chris Connell from Raleigh First Assembly is going to be in the studio tomorrow talking about cohabitation, love shack or lust shack. So you don't want to miss that show. It's a great prelude to Thanksgiving, it sounds like. And then, we've got some great things. Steve said the best of the shows are Thursday and Friday. Not that it's better than ours, but I don't know what he means by that, the best. I'm sure it's because he's making his re-entry here soon. He said he'll be back in the studio on Monday. So the Christian Wacko will be back on Monday. But stay with us today, tomorrow, Chris Connell, and then Thursday and Friday, something's going on for Thanksgiving, I suppose. So listen, let's jump right back into the interview with Lynn Daniels. Lynn, before we went to the break, you were talking about forgiveness. You had made a list at the recommendation you shared over the break with by Dave Horner, your pastor at Providence at the time, where you had accepted Christ already. So you had forgiveness of your past, present, and really future sins. You're standing with God. But there was a lot of things you were toting around. So tell us a little bit about that. And then your wife with cancer, how did that end?
Well, Sean, it does go back to that. And it's amazing how God in this whole process works things out. But David had done a sermon on just forgiveness, and he laid out a way to do that. And I'm sitting here thinking, you know, I've still got some a little bit of in my suitcase. I've still got some baggage of some things I just really hadn't let go of. Some people may have known about them, but a lot of them I knew about, nobody else did, and it was just continues to eat me up, and I did carry it around with me. So I went home, and he'd recommend. I went home actually in a real dark place, and I'd already written my things down, and I just prayed to God about each one and said, Lord, I forgive that person, or maybe it's the situation where the person really hurt me, and I do. It's okay for them to forgive me and through you. So, but after doing that, it was just that was just a difference for me. It did help me understand that I can do that I can go to Him and just say, hey, look, I can't do it anymore, Lord, or I'm carrying this around and I know it's blocking me from being able to do your work. And of course, as time went on, I saw that even more with my first wife died of cancer, and through a period of time, it was pretty tough. I just had so many brothers and sisters in Christ that helped me walk through that. And then I realized that, there's a time when you have to go through, and there's that grieving period in which, you see the denial, the anger, you question God and all that. But just being in Bible study and having brothers and sisters that were surrounding me in a lot of different ways really helped me get through it. But when that happens, you can always look back. You can't look back at that time, but I do look back and say, well, God, Lord, you had a plan all the time, because what I went through, just even getting involved within that year of my wife down, there were 2 other people that were in Bible study together and lost their wives. So I was able to at least be there to be able to say, well, I've been there. I'm glad I wish you didn't have to be there, and I wouldn't want to go through it again. But God does use us as the experience we have to help others walk through those times that they don't understand and they can't get through.
Wow. So what made the difference for you as you talk about your wife? You've emptied this list out, and this is just great that we're having this conversation. It comes up in the ministry quite a bit. And, to be transparent, it's something I'm actually going through now in the role I was in, with ministry and so forth. You get hurt. And, it's something that this is just wonderful how we're having this conversation even over the air to encourage other people. But there's this list of, hey, there's these wrongs and you're burdened down and you can't be the blessing, you need to be the others. And so you empty that out and you forgave them. You forgave these individuals, and then your wife passes. Were you tempted to be angry at God over that? How did you? What made the difference in terms of your ability to let those things go?
Well, some of it you just go through a period of time where you're basically numb. I'm even thinking right now, one of our dear brothers, Roland Massey, has been involved in Friday morning. Dear friend died Sunday and was being buried today.
Okay.
I think a lot about what his wife Teeny and their 2 kids are even going through now. How do you get through it? I don't think I couldn't have gotten through that period of time unless I had a relationship with the Lord, and I understood what I was going through was okay. It's okay to go through that.
Yeah.
You feel like, well, I can't do this. Should I cry? Should I go do this? Or should I talk this way or whatever? No. You just go through and you just walk through it in a numb fashion.
Yeah.
And then God gives that strength, and then He does it through other people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing people all of a sudden that were in my life, and maybe they said something and it was just the right thing. And I've gone back to people and said, you probably don't remember that time, but this is something you said that really helped me at that time. Of course, the person looks at you and says, I don't remember saying it, but I'm glad I did. So,
yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
So if I hear you correctly also, you're saying, it's okay to not be okay when you go through these things, right?
Well, it is. And I think for us men particularly, it goes back to that. We got to be men. We've got to be strong. We've got to do that. But, the only way God's going to help us get through that is to show that weakness, to have that chink in the armor where we allow Him and others to really, really help us to get through that. And it all boils down to forgiveness.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's the daily thing that we have to look at.
Yeah, I guess it's a choice, that initial choice to forgive, and then a process that you continue to walk through, right? Folks, I'm interviewing Lynn Daniels, the Executive Director of the Raleigh Rescue Mission. You stay right here. When we get back, we're going to go into what he does now. this one, the Foo Fighters. Man, this is a jam. All right. I didn't even plan the music on that one. This is great. All right. I'm with Lynn Daniels, the Executive Director of the Raleigh Rescue Mission. And we are having a great conversation today about forgiveness, and we're getting ready to go in to how forgiveness impacts our generosity, supporting causes and organizations that are part of God's kingdom like Raleigh Rescue, and then even Thanksgiving, how that ties together with these two concepts. You know, there's a passage in the Bible, Lynn might be, he's probably going to reference it some, Luke 7, where there's an immoral woman, and she's basically forgiven $1 billion debt. And there's a Pharisee who doesn't really think he's forgiven a whole lot. And one of them is very grateful, and one of them isn't. I wonder who that was. And so, my goal this Thanksgiving, Lynn, and I hope it will be for others as well, I know for me personally, it is to just really relish the fact that I've been forgiven $1 billion debt. Just, I'm just as much, when you look at my old person, my sin, just as high. But because of that, man, I am grateful. And when I focus on that, going back to looking at other people's offenses against me, they really start to diminish fast when I look at the immensity of what God's done for me. So we're glad to have you on the show. We're going to bridge into... And I don't think we're going to do callers. I can give you the number. If you have something you just have to say that's going to change the world, or you have a question for Lynn, please call in 1-877-44-TRUTH, 1-877-44-TRUTH. If not, we can maybe Chris will take callers tomorrow. Thank you for your patience on that. So, Lynn, going from forgiveness and you forgiving all these offenses that had happened just over the course of life, as you're going about and you got a family, you bury your wife who had cancer, and you were able to even view that rightly because the body of Christ is what I'm hearing, that really relying on them. How does that land you then at Raleigh Rescue Mission, where you're working with, let's face it, people that need holistic restoration, right?
We sure do, and it's that's the foundation of the mission is we work with the whole person. We work with the physical, emotional, and spiritual, and I think that's so important when you talk about a life changing. Lives of people coming in. The people we work with, a lot of them are they're not really any different than you and I. When it gets boiled down to that, I think the first question somebody asked me said, "Well, aren't you afraid where you're working? What are we going to tell your friend?" And my brother was asking me one time, "Lynn, what am I going to tell your friends what you're doing?" I said, "Tell them exactly what I'm doing, because I'm really doing what God's called me to do, and that's what I want to do." But
wow,
working with people that you that nobody else wants to or really knows how to. But probably the scariest thing for me is we're sitting down with somebody and all of a sudden I start seeing myself in that person and realizing, hey,
wow,
I've still got some changing to do. So not necessarily fear of what the person could do to me because of their background or anything, but just that fear. That was probably one of the first realizations when I really started working at the mission that I was able to recognize in myself. So
that the others, that these men and women have the same, you have similar struggles. They
exactly.
have similar struggles as you, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I know through the times when I've had struggles, fortunately I've had family and I've had individuals and I've had resources that have gotten me through those type things, whereas, a lot of people don't or
really
and do that type thing. So, but really when you start looking at any change that takes place within those that we work with in the mission are really, it has to start with the forgiveness. And, one of the things, challenges we look at is getting a person really to look at themselves. One of our directors, Reverend Rick Fitzgerald's always said, we got to slow everybody down to about 100 miles an hour to be able to do something, get them to realize that. But then also dealing with the truth. A lot of people don't really know what the truth is, or they've buried the truth and everything that hurts them. They've buried it so deep that, you just wonder, can I ever get to it? So it's kind of like sometimes peeling an onion.
Yeah.
A person come in, we start working with them, and they'll start taking off those parts. But when they start getting down to the real stinky part, that's where the kind of rubber meets the road as to whether that person even wants to deal with it or not. So it's a process, and we know that's true in relapse and in any of the addictions that people have. Is that it's a process that you got to go through. You get a little better, hopefully, but as you and I were talking, sometimes it's you go along and all of a sudden, boom, a person falls off the face of the earth. They've just gone out and done it big time. They've relapsed, and that's another challenge. You get connected to somebody, and you want so bad for them to happen. So, understanding those boundaries and where you have to work with that person. And that's true in any relationship. We can't be an enabler.
Right.
We got to be able to help family members, kids, and do that type of thing. So.
Right. So what advice, as it pertains to what you do there at the Raleigh Rescue, I was sharing with you some of our family dynamics that we encounter every year, What advice do you have for people like me that have families and others who are listening where there's that loved one and you don't want to enable them? You don't want to be irresponsible if they've stolen from you or, they're taking drugs, whatever the case may be. What is your advice to our listeners about dealing with that loved one over the holidays?
Well, I think let's just go back to forgiveness, and even with yourself. I think if you've gotten to the point in your life and your relationship with Christ that you're real comfortable in your own skin, and I'm not saying cocky or anything else, but being able to take a step back from it. And a lot of times, I think we talk sometimes about you got to have a tender heart but a tough hide, so that goes along some with tough love. So
that's good.
Probably one of the things is really understanding boundaries. I know there's a lot of books out of about that, and we've done a lot of boundary work at the mission with our staff because it's just not healthy for either person in whichever way you're doing it. So, but I think you got to first of all, you never stop loving that person.
Right.
It's that unforgivable love or the unconditional love that, God gives us. And, but being able to separate out, we can't take it personally. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, what that other person says or doing is really, to some degree, none of our business because we're not making that choice. We're not doing it. So how do you combine that with continuing to love somebody? And also in some way sharing that you care, because what goes along with love is that compassion or that care.
Right.
And then I think another thing realizing is that when others do really get mad at us and they're hurting us, it's not us personally. It's a lot of times that the person they're trying to accomplish something. They're trying to get something out of it. They're trying to reach a goal, and we just happen to be at that particular time in their way, and they never told us what the goal was. So all of a sudden they're mad at us, and we're saying, "Oh my gosh, why are you mad at me?" or whatever else, and it really just ends up being we just happen to be the person that got in the way of them reaching their goal. And whereas that person would have said, "Hey, look, this is what I'm trying to accomplish," and what we said, "Oh, good, I'll get out of the way, or I can help you do that." So I think that's something that I've learned a lot in being at the mission and working and doing what else. So, and it's really helped me in terms of really understanding myself. And it probably goes back to the sensitivity of saying, well, it's just a situation. That's just where it is. And the forgiveness is there.
Yeah. So you've got people, Raleigh Rescue, you've got people that are going through, talking about your supporters, and maybe even some of the supporters of people that have been through the program. I mean, I know there's missions that I'm involved with. That's the case. I mean, graduates, and then you're just shocked by the generosity that they demonstrate. And some of those we serve sometimes. It's like, wow, I had no idea that person was that person, right? So looking at your support base, people just like us who have issues, how does that impact the generosity piece of this? How does Raleigh Rescue, do you thrive from others' generosity? Do imperfect people who struggle with forgiveness and who forgive, who's going through this life, do they impact what you do at Raleigh Rescue, Lynn?
No doubt about it. And I've often said that if you look at the process or you look at the growth or transformation of an individual when they come in, a lot of times they are running 100 miles an hour. It's everybody else's fault. They ain't got time for this. I got to get a job. But they're not dealing with their issues. But if they can ever get to the point where they can start looking outside of themselves And a lot of that has to do, well, can I help the other man that's in the program and got at the rescue mission, but also going out in the community and doing some stuff. This just past year, we had some of our ladies, they had more fun, went out and did a Habitat for Humanity house. I mean, they came back, they were excited, they had paint all over them, but at that point they were able to give back. And I think when a person starts giving, somehow the getting goes away. You can't do both at the same time. So, and I'll often see with our residents or clients that come in, I'm thinking that person's starting to turn the corner because they're in that mode now. They want to help somebody else, and it's kind of Sean is kind of the wounded healer. You know, we are wounded and whatever else, and part of that healing process gets to the point where we start helping somebody else. So that's just that is important when it comes to that.
Yes. So, Lynn, looking at your clientele now, what is maybe one story you could share? We got 3 minutes before the break that you're thankful for, that you've seen at Raleigh Rescue this year. Maybe it's not a resident, maybe it's a supporter, maybe it's with the staff, because I know in order for there to be discipleship, you've got to have disciplers, right? So, what is one story that you're thankful for that might inspire generosity and thanksgiving in the rest of us, if you don't mind?
Well, the one that comes to me is, and this has been over a long period of time, we had an individual that was, I think we first met him. He came into mission probably 12 or 13 years ago. Just a person you wanted so bad, but then he'd fall off the wagon, he'd be missing, and then he'd come back, and he did that 3 or 4 times, and then finally, I don't know what it was, God just was able to change that heart, and there was a difference. And so and then at that point, he wanted to help others, and plus he realized that, hey, I am capable of going out working. Well, Builders of Hope, which had just gotten started with Nancy Murray or Nancy Welch, and so he went to work in her program, and just unbelievable the kindness and what he was being able to do there. And guess what? He comes back in the kitchen every Monday and volunteers in there, and he's just right beside those guys. And to me, I'm just thankful that he can come in and do that because he can make a difference with those guys and ladies that are in the kitchen working. So I think when we see people come back and give and realize that they are thankful what God did, and it happened to be done through the staff and things at the Raleigh Rescue Mission.
Right. Lynn, before we go to break, one last thing, and then we'll wrap up in the next segment. How would you describe generosity in your life and in the lives of your supporters? What does generosity mean to you?
Well, for me, obviously we encourage people to give, and a lot of times it's in helping that person grow, particularly helping them understand that they've got a passion for something, that they've got resources, and then also finding that need. A lot of times you just can't. It's hard to connect people to what that real passion or need is. For me, one way I've experienced that is being able to give. And I do. I give to our organization, I give to the church, and I give to some other paraministries. And that just, somehow there's always enough when you give.
Yeah.
You can't outgive God, and we've seen that at the mission too. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm interviewing Lynn Daniels, folks. You stay right there. We're going to wrap up this last segment.
But don't you know who you are? What has been done for you? Don't you know who you are?
Tell you, identity's a big thing, isn't it?
You are more than choice you've made. You are more.
You know, it's amazing when we wrap our minds around, if we can, I guess it'll take eternity to really know how much God loves us and what He's made us. It's amazing. How much is one life, Lynn? How much is one life, one man, one woman at the Raleigh Rescue Mission worth? It's worth, and get this, folks, it's worth God laying down His life. Wow.
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 Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow. How can we put a price tag on the value of a life, because God values us that much that He died? And then Romans says, if He loved us that much to lay down our lives, how shall He not freely give us all things? Those things that will, make us really the me He's made us to be, and which is Him living out through us. So we're with Lynn Daniels today, Raleigh Rescue Mission Director. Awesome show, I think, not because obviously of the host, but just a story, this big, grand story that we see in Lynn's life and how God has weaved it all together. I love it. So, Lynn, as we end the show today, this last segment, how can listeners manage well, through the faith God gives them, forgiveness? How can they manage well the resources of time, talent, and treasure, and really all of that being an expression of their thanksgiving? How can they do that practically through Raleigh Rescue?
Well, that's a great question. I think, first of all, I always encourage people to give. And you got to understand, we're in the kingdom work. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of us are in this together, and but God knows who needs what, and He provides that. The second thing is I kind of lay it out really in 4 P's the way people can help us. One would be prayer. We are a praying ministry.
Amen.
We have people that outside of the mission that are praying for us, and we start our meetings. We do a lot of praying with our residents, and that's really a key. So we need people's prayer.
Okay.
The second thing is we need people to participate with us as volunteers. I mean, not everybody can give money, although I still feel like if you look at your priorities and God first, family second, and everything else third, and we give in that manner, that He's just going to supply those needs. I've just seen it in my life and how He does that. So,
wow.
But volunteering could do. Of course, right now we're just slammed. We got a lot going on. We got a lot of volunteers. So if anybody really is interested, you can go to our webpage, www.raleighrescue.org and really do something after the first year. Take a look at those different opportunities we got and see if there's a match.
Okay.
But also, if you feel like God's leading you to volunteer somewhere else, do that. Just volunteer. Same thing with, you can provide us with in-kind goods, and that's clothes, any kind of housing items, toiletries, paper. I mean, anything that you need in your household, we need the same thing in the mission. Plus, also when a person moves out. So, and here again, if you got an abundance of that, you can give it to us, but also you can give it to somebody else too.
Right.
Give, and then the last, obviously, is just partner with us financially. But here again, if you got a passion and your heart's telling you to give to that person that your heart's leaning towards.
Right.
There's plenty for everybody. Now, that's probably weird to hear from somebody that we have to raise a certain amount of money, but I just see it happen. I see God dispersing it the way it needs, and I see how He's blessed us with abundance and being able to give to other people, and how we've helped. As I told you earlier, I've seen truckloads go out helping somebody and multiple truckloads coming in. So we just never can get our cupboard bare when it comes to Him. Now, we're going to let you know what we need. Right. But that's it. So if you just look at that part of it. But here again, for me, my part of giving, forgiveness, once you get to that giving part, it is so neat to watch how God does that, not only in your own life, but you also look to see how the people are blessed.
Yes. So what you went through with the forgiveness, and that just seemed like to be a milestone in your spiritual growth. How does that help you in leading a rescue mission where you're responsible for how many residents there?
Well, right now we've got a little over 100 that are actually, in our programs that stay there, but we help so many other people. And right now I've got over 60 staff that, part of my job is to shepherd or to minister to them, make sure they're healthy so they can help people that aren't not healthy. And so, but there's just,
so what I was going with that, Lynn, is the forgiveness piece, that accomplishing, getting through that. Does that help you, or how does it help you in your current role of caring for those residents and this big budget responsibility, whatever that number is, that you are responsible for raising? Did that help you in this? Is there a correlation?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and here again, that it's just a process we go through that you got to do forgiveness. And hey, look, I know I've been forgiven when I accepted Christ in my life. I've gone through and forgiven other people, but it's something I have to do every day. And it's something I have to remind myself every day I've got to give. And I've got to also be an example for the Raleigh Rescue Mission and people in our community on how you do that. And particularly giving to those that are less fortunate. Because, God said, what you did for the least of my people, you did for me.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is you've been forgiven a debt a big debt, $1 billion debt. And when you're debt-free spiritually, buddy, you can really pour it into the kingdom because you don't tote around all that baggage, right?
Amen.
Amen.
You got it just right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's good stuff. So, folks, listen, Raleigh Rescue, you can pray. This is a kingdom work. You can participate after the first of the year. You can provide in-kind resources, Acts 5 giving, land, gifts of stock. Those things count also. Thank you for listening.